Hi, welcome to Matt's Garage, where this season we're restoring my 1977 Scout 2. Some of you may have heard me refer to it as a 72. It is a 72, but it's kind of a mishmash of a bunch of parts, and most of the mechanical stuff I upgraded to a 77. On today's episode, I'm doing something I alluded to a few weeks ago, which was an unboxing of my Kwikwire wiring harness. So I'm going to open it up and show you what's inside and talk about my previous system and how I'm hoping this will be a great upgrade for me. Okay, so let's open it up and see what I got. Oh, so you have an instruction book here, obviously. It's got all the different makes on the front, which, you know, is, I think, a feature of this kit. It is very universal. So, you know, they make custom kits if you have a model that's popular and supported by the aftermarket, but I do not. What's nice is they've got the instrument. It looks like they have the ignition wiring for Ford, GM, and all that, so you can do the translation. Nice color instruction book. Just reading through this, I think it does take a bit of electrical know-how. You're going to have to spend a little time kind of having the wiring harness out in front of you and understanding what comes where. Like, for example, this is number 22 light blue 18 gauge oil pressure sender. So you'd have to go through this harness and find, so this says turn signal, so you'd have to go through till you found the light blue. The nice part is it looks like each wire is labeled, there you go, oil pressure sender. So that's not too hard. So you got to sort of translate from the book to the harness. I should stop and say I got my Kwikwire harness from IH Parts America. If you're doing a Scout, you should call those guys because they can guide you based on your build. Mine, I'm not going to have a ton of accessories, so I went with the 14. I was going to go with the 22, and they make a 22 extra long. I was going to do that one, but I don't need the 22. I'll explain why in a minute. Now let's get into the harness. Okay, looking at this, let's pull out the fuse box. It's got a little aluminum cover, which is nice. Got these ATO standard fuses. What's nice about this, it's got a kill switch for the ignition. Obviously, if you're a car guy, you could probably steal any car because that's the first place you check. Comes with a couple relays. I'm assuming one's the horn. One's a horn and one's probably the battery or headlights, horn and headlights, so that's nice. Those are already pre-relayed. Then you got standard flashers. Now if you're doing LED lights all around, you're going to need to upgrade to the LED flashers, which Kwikwire sells. But all in all, it's nice. It's got a nice mounting bracket. The one thing I don't like about this, and this happens with a lot of kits I'll show you actually, is first of all, you can see here there's already some marks on the wires where this rubs. So I might just actually grab a piece of electrical tape right now just to keep that from rubbing. The other thing is, you know, you've got these screw heads that protrude just a little bit, so you can't exactly flush mount that. You got to space it out. Just something to think about. Maybe not the worst idea anyway. It looks to me like this is in pretty good shape. I mean, I don't see any flaws with it. What I'm seeing though, okay, so this is what this basically is. This is basically three fuse banks connected, and then this is a relay bank screwed into the fuse bank, and you can see there these screws are loose, so I'll probably pull out one relay. I'll just tighten this up a bit. There. So anything you buy these days, you're going to have to modify. I mean, it's not a drama, but just something to consider. But this is interesting, because I didn't really realize that that's basically all a fuse block is a set of fuse banks and a relay bank, and then the magic really happens in how they're jumpered and wired in the back. So, but for the price, I mean, there's really no value in assembling it yourself. I might space this out a little bit so it's sitting even. Right now it's kind of canted this way. Space it out, make it nice and sturdy. but you know, on, off. The switch is really nice quality. It's nice that they give you a little cover. It kind of makes it a little trick. That's sort of my first impression looking over this kit. It also comes with some connectors. These type of pin connectors you just break off. It looks like this is for the GM ignition, and so is this module for GM ignition, which is nice because that's what I've got. Basically everything you need to do an installation at the base level. You'll have to, you're going to have to customize anything you do. That's just the nature of the hobby, but this is a great starting point. I should also say that there's a basic kit that doesn't come with the cover or the switch, but honestly for the money it's nice. You just shut it off and an extra peace of mind. All right, let me put this somewhere. I'm going to slide this over and sort of tilt it up, and we're going to compare it to what came out of the Scout. Oh yeah! You know, you'd think you might suspect that I did this for drama, but I really didn't. This is exactly how the harness looked when it came out of my Scout. And, you know, I stabbed this together over many iterations over the years, and I think I shared the story that I finished it the night before Gavin was born, so when my wife went into labor, I was exhausted. So when she saw this laying out, she's like, oh, it's my favorite wiring harness. Now, I used the in-dash style ignition. I really hate these things. There's really no way to make it a clean install. I mean, I bent over these connectors to try to get it to be like not sticking out every which way. I'm sure there's a type of connector that can sit on these terminals that comes straight out. I obviously didn't have that kind of forethought when I put this together, but the other thing that is nice about the Kwikwire is each circuit is sized to what it needs to be. Whereas here I use like the wire you buy at the hardware or at the auto parts store, and some of these I can look at now going, okay, way overkill on the gauge. For example, the ignition on the starter motor, the exciter on the starter motor, it doesn't need to be a big gauge because it just basically trips a relay, but I've got it at a pretty big gauge here. You want to right size your wires. You definitely don't want to be under, but there's really no advantage to being way oversized. Now, the heart of this system was this painless fuse block. And I hated this thing because you got to put little spade terminals or some, not spade, but the other kind. What's it called? The fork. The fork terminal goes in there and then screws down. And it's just an awkward kind of a setup. I guess you could use a smaller ring terminal with a bigger gauge. But, you know, what that happens is you just have all these wires coming out this way, and it's really not user-friendly from a space-saving standpoint. However, when I look at the construction of this painless setup, it's actually quite nice. You only get one relay, the horn relay, so you got to do a separate headlight relay. But even this one is just a relay bank screwed into this fuse block. So that's just kind of the nature of these things. What I'm noticing now is, if I wanted to, I actually could take these bars off and redo the pins on the back with a pin kit and just have it come out like a normal harness. And that's actually part of my plan for this. Instead of getting the 22 on this, I'm just going to use this to customize my harness, and I'll have basically way more circuits than I need. For this kit, I was using this and a few of these fuse blocks, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with these. They're very useful. Like, for example, if you're doing a Phytech or something and you need that hot from the battery as well as the always on, you can run the hot to the Phytech off of one with the 25 amp and then do another one for the, like to a relay, through a relay for the one that's on and or run and crank. And then you can also just hook up your stereo hot off of this just next to the battery. So battery goes in here, powers this, and then you get your power out. So these are actually quite useful. And I have another one that's a little more trick where the light comes on if the fuse is blown, which makes it easy to identify blown fuses. So you can see here, you know, really nothing materially different. This is just so much cleaner because the wires are already pinned in and they go into your harness. Obviously, they give you quite a bit of extra, and you can sort of and it's not loomed, so you can unclip all the zip ties and run it the way you want. There's two types of wires, I'll say. One is like attached to the harness, and one is independent. I can't quite see the independent one right now, but I know it's in here because it said it in the instructions. But basically, there's wires that run from one place to another, like to a switch to a accessory, where it obviously wouldn't go into the fuse block, because the fuse, the wiring harness goes into the switch, and then you need a wire to go from the switch to whatever you're switching. So that's normal, and the instructions give a pretty detailed explanation of what's in the motor group, what's in the ignition, whatever, all the groups. One more thing I wanted to show you guys is my automotive electrical box. So what I've done is I've gone and I've ordered several rolls online of high quality automotive wire. And this is what I mean. I can extend this harness in many different ways. Another thing you definitely want to get is, a set of relays. Because even though this comes with a horn and headlight relay, the fact is relays are little miracle devices, and I'll explain exactly what I mean by that. This is a 5-pin relay. That is not a 5-pin relay. What is that? This is a 5-pin relay because it's got 5 pins, and you buy a kit and it comes with the pigtail, which is nice, and then you don't actually have to splice it. You can pin these out and then make it so it's a continuous connection, or you can just put a weather pack on these, whatever. The 5 pins are nice because they're actually like mini logic boards. What I mean by that is that center pin will allow power through it, the relay. So basically you got one ground, you got one power in, and then you have a switch which connects from one terminal to another. And when you flip the switch and send a little bit of power, just a tiny bit of amperage through, it closes the relay and lets the big voltage through. Yes, Mrs. Matt's garage? Okay. I will flip the Brussels sprouts, yes. So you got to take care of the Mrs. Garage, whatever. If you're Bert, it's Mrs. Bert's garage. If you're John, Mrs. John's garage. So anyway, where was I? Right. So a little bit of amperage allows a lot of amperage to go through the relay. So the relay takes the brunt of the amperage and takes it off the switch. But this 5th pin, what it does is it bridges it when it's closed, like when there's no power going through the switch. And you're like, well, why would you want that? Well, I think I showed in an episode on the windshield wiper wiring. You can use it as a logic board where it's like an if-then on-off. So, and that'll allow you to say, do a low voltage at some points and a high voltage at others by rearranging the way you wire it. So it ends up being a very useful tool. I'm going to do an episode on a Subscriber 66 Fury. That's a Mopar product, right? It's a Plymouth. And if you're wiring a Phytech, for example, you need that power that's always on, whether you're in crank or run. With Chevy and Ford, I believe there's one circuit that is always got power, 12 volts in crank and run. But with the Plymouth, there's one wire that's 9 volts on crank and 12 volts on run, or the opposite. But the point is, you don't have a single wire to power the fuel pump relay on your Phytech. So you can use a relay. You basically splice those 2 wires into the switched pass-through to ground, and then you put 12 volts straight from the battery to the Phytech through the circuit, so that whether it's getting the 9 volts or the 12, it's holding this relay open and letting the full 12 from the battery go straight to the Phytech. Relays are awesome. I love them. You need to study them and understand them. They're very, very important in automotive applications. So that's the unboxing of the Kwikwire harness. I'm just going to talk a little bit. You can tune out now if you're just a Kwikwire or you're just a wiring viewer. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Scout and my plans for wiring it. One of the problems with the Scout is it has several bulkhead connectors. There's one here, and there were 2 there, and all the wires, I'm not joking, are green. So that's like a scout joke. When somebody has an electrical question, you say, cut the green wire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all this stuff out, and I'm going to close every hole on the firewall. And then when I decide to run the Kwikwire, I'm only going to put in the holes and grommets that I need for that system, and obviously like the accelerator cable and all that. But it'll be a nice cleaner install once I do this. I'm also going to paint this firewall to match the color of the truck. So that's it. We covered the Kwikwire, my previous wiring harness, my plans for the Scout, as well as like some of the accessories you want when you're doing electric automotive wiring. One thing, look, you can start a fire, so don't go janky on your electrical system. Even though mine looks like a bird's nest, all the connections are solid. Everything was protected and wrapped. I've electrocuted myself on an electrical system. I still have the scar on this finger here. And depending on what circuit you're touching, it'd be a lot of amperage. So use your fuses. Use a maxi fuse for the whole system to protect your whole system. Nothing worse than burning a $70,000 car down over a 10-cent part. That's my safety tip for the day, and I'll see you next time on Matt's Garage.